So Democrats are rightfully concerned about the impact that the so-called moderates are having on the potential passing of President Biden's agenda. Let's talk about it in today's video. Hi, I'm Mike Greiner. I'm a lifelong Democratic activist who's concerned about the direction our country is taking. If you share my concerns, maybe you could like this video and subscribe to this channel, maybe even click that little bell that will notify you when I post something new. So recent polling data bears out the fact that the economic agenda President Biden and the Democrats are trying to push through Congress is overwhelmingly popular. For example, and as always, I'll post links to the articles down below that you can verify this for yourself, 80% of respondents to a recent poll say that giving Medicare the power to negotiate for lower drug prices is a good reason to pass this bill. That includes, by the way, a majority of independents. Same thing for raising taxes on the rich and for expanding Medicare to cover dental, vision, and hearing coverage. And you can go down the list. Every single one of the issues that's raised has better than 60% positive approval rating. Many of them more than 70%. Consider the following. They would like to make childcare more affordable, creating clean, renewable energy jobs that help combat climate change. That has 72% approval rating. Providing free pre-kindergarten for 3- and 4-year-old children and creating universal paid family and medical leave. Again, huge majority support these things. Same thing for providing 2 years of tuition-free community college and making permanent the child credit for most families with children. These are the key components that are being included in the $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill that's currently being negotiated as it goes through Congress. And yet some of the so-called moderates have raised issues with some of them. For example, while Senator Manchin has said that he's in favor of rolling back some of the Trump tax cuts, Kirsten Cinema of Arizona has said she's not in favor of raising taxes on the wealthy or corporations, which is one of the highest polling items in this poll. Cinema has also said that she's not in favor of giving Medicare the power to negotiate for lower drug prices, something that is the highest rated item in the poll with 80% approval rating. I mean, it's just unbelievable to me that she thinks that this is something that she can turn her back on. This is something that overwhelmingly people support. And people say this is a problem with the Democrats in Congress. It's not a problem with the Democrats in Congress. It's a problem basically with a small minority, perhaps even as few as 2 members of Congress, Senators Manchin and Cinema, who unfortunately, because of the very narrow margin Democrats have in the Senate, we need to keep all of them together to be able to pass anything. And that essentially gives them a veto on anything that can be passed. Boy, I would love it if we were in a situation that we had a couple extra Democrats where we'd be able to try to negotiate something separate from Senator Cinema and Manchin, but unfortunately we're not in that situation. Another example that's really painful is Senator Manchin arguing against the efforts by the Biden administration to try to shift us from a carbon-based to a non-carbon-based energy system. That too is something that's overwhelmingly popular with 72% approval rating in this poll. Senator Manchin, though, represents West Virginia, which even though coal mining jobs now are a small minority of the jobs available in the state, they still are central to the mythology that the state has about itself. And so it's going to be very hard for Senator Manchin to turn his back on that mythology. Setting aside the fact that apparently he has personal financial interests that benefit from coal mining. But the thing that's especially bothersome to me is how these moderates somehow claim that they're being moderates by saying we just need to reduce the value of the reconciliation bill down from $3.5 trillion over 10 years to $1.5 trillion. That's the number that Senator Manchin has thrown out. Now, that number does not appear to be based on anything in particular. It's just some random number that he pulled out of his butt. Somehow, by cutting back on the goals of the Biden administration, he's showing that he is a moderate. And this is really what I want to talk about today, which is the idea of moderation by cutting back on the economic agenda of the Democrats. That idea is really misplaced because overwhelmingly, Democrats both in Congress and across the country, as well as independents, support the Democratic economic agenda. In fact, even among Republicans, many of the items that Democrats favor in our economic agenda receive strong support. So how is it that we get ourselves into this right-left battle with the moderates somehow differentiating themselves from the progressives? You see, the problem is that what defines most Republicans in terms of their conservatism is not their position on economic issues, it's their position on social issues. This is an area, frankly, where Democrats cannot compromise, because after all, you can't be slightly less racist and somehow think that you're being a liberal. You can't be slightly less bigoted against the LGBTQ and somehow think that's acceptable. You're either a bigot or you're not, and Republicans like bigots. The irony is that as the Republicans have been very successful in kind of pushing their legislative agenda and their political agenda forward, the place that they've really failed has been in the cultural agenda. In the battle for America's culture, frankly, the progressives have been winning. Starting in the mid-90s, we have a majority of Americans now who favor people of mixed races being able to marry. A majority of Americans favor gay people being able to marry. And a majority of people favor some access to abortion. If you watch TV, you can just see how our culture has changed. Women have a voice now in entertainment. People of color and gay people are no longer invisible. This is what is driving the conservatives crazy, and they're somehow trying to turn back the clock by pushing a conservative social agenda through primarily the courts, but also Congress. Now, ironically, a relatively small minority of people favor the socially conservative agenda that Republicans are pushing. The problem that we have with it is what's considered intensity of feeling. Let me give you an example here. The majority of Americans favor some restriction on the rights of gun owners. However, to those Americans, that's just one issue among many that people will consider their vote on, and it's not a deal breaker for them. However, for a small minority of gun owners and NRA activists, this is the only issue they vote on. It's the only issue they care about, and it's a deal breaker if somebody does not follow their agenda 100%. As a result of this, someone who does not favor some type of gun control could potentially win over the support of some people who favor gun control. On the other hand, someone who does favor gun control can never win over the support of anybody who opposes it. This is the same for so many of the social issues that we're talking about. For example, abortion. Again, for most Americans, this is just one issue among many that is considered. However, for the true anti-abortion activists, it's the only issue they care about. And if someone is pro-choice, they will never get that person's vote. So essentially what Republicans have succeeded in doing is putting together a coalition of small groups of socially conservative individuals who care passionately about one or two issues and nothing else. Whereas the Democrats truly represent the broad swath of where America stands on most issues now. Because most Americans are in favor of abortion rights, in favor of gay marriage, in favor of taxing the rich, etc., etc., etc. So the point of this is somehow reducing your support for the Democrats' economic agenda does not somehow paint you as a moderate. Because the people on the other side don't really care about the economic issues. That's not what's driving them. It's the social issues that are driving them. And that's a place we can't compromise. So there's this misguided perception that somehow moderate Democrats are going to be able to bring over some support from the more conservative groups in America. But that's a total misreading of the data. What the data shows is that these groups of individuals who are kind of stitched together by the Republicans based upon their animosity on certain social issues are absolutely unwinnable to the Democrats under any circumstances, because they have certain deal breaker issues that determine whether they're going to vote for somebody or not, and the Democrats can't compromise on those things. We can't somehow say, oh, by being slightly less pro-gun control than we were before, that somehow we're going to bring over some of the gun rights supporters, because any amount of gun control is going to be something that they oppose. What's more, even if we say we're not going to support any gun control, they're so suspicious of the Democrats based upon the positions we've taken in the past and just the rhetoric that is being spewed by Fox News and their elected officials that they wouldn't even believe us if we said that we weren't in favor of some level of gun control. As a result, any effort to try to bring those people over by somehow reducing the ambition of our economic agenda actually reduces our potential for winning. I think that the data here is clear. What it shows is that Republicans win when they're talking about social issues. Why is that? Not because they represent the majority, but because that really drives their supporters. On the other hand, Democrats win when we're talking about economic issues. And that's not necessarily because it drives our supporters with the same passions that the social issues drive the Republicans, but it's because this is something that represents the broad swath of Americans. While that broad swath of Americans, frankly, is kind of ambivalent on a lot of these social issues, one thing they're clear on is the economic agenda of the Democrats is something they favor. Because if they're not driven so passionately by the social issues the way the Republicans are, one thing they can understand is money in their own pocket. And if we make it clear to them that if you elect the Republicans based upon these social issues, they're going to take money out of your pocket, that's where the Democrats stand a chance of winning. Now, Republicans in the past have actually been pretty successful in trying to paint it that really the Democrats are the ones who take money from your pocket by doing the taxing and spending. That's where I think President Biden and the leadership in Congress have it right in emphasizing the fact that we're trying to tax the rich, not everybody. And that for the vast majority of people earning under $400,000 a year, they're not going to see a tax increase. And yet if we can turn around and point to things like the child tax credit, which is something that's a direct deposit into many people's bank accounts across the United States, that would go away were it for the Republicans, that's the type of thing that might motivate people to vote for Democrats. So again, moderating our position on economic issues doesn't help at all. It doesn't paint you as a moderate and somehow woo over some of the conservatives. All it does is make it that you're weakening the argument the Democrats have for re-election. Well, if you agree with me or disagree with me, I'd love to see your comments down below. And if you could like this channel, maybe subscribe to the channel, I'd sure appreciate it. Thanks again for watching. And in the meantime, let's hope for continued progress. Thank you.